Hello again. It is sometimes said that if you repeat a lie often enough, it will in time come to be regarded as the truth. This is certainly the case as far as England's history is concerned, because most people are now convinced that during the Victorian period, the country was a hotbed of racial prejudice and hatred of those belonging to other races. Until a few years ago, nobody would have believed anything as foolish as this. But then that is the power of propaganda. It drips away and seeps into the subconscious mind until we accept even the most idiotic idea as being common sense. So it has been with the history of Britain and her empire. We have now been persuaded that Indian and black people were treated with contempt in 19th century England, and that those like Mary Seacole were prevented from becoming nurses because of their skin colour, that kind of thing. It is a lie, and I thought it might be worth giving a few concrete examples to make this clear. Mary Seacole is a good starting point. She wasn't selected to go to the Crimea as a nurse because she didn't make a written application and provide 2 references, like all the other nurses who were recruited. In other words, she expected special treatment, and when she didn't get this, she assumed that racism was to blame. Let's look at a case of a woman who did follow the usual procedures when it came to entering the medical profession. I'm guessing that not a single viewer will ever have heard of Annie Wardlaw Jagnandardam. Odd that, since they've all heard of Mary Seacole, the failed nurse. Jagannatham was an Indian woman who in 1890 was appointed house surgeon at the Edinburgh Hospital for Women and Children. She studied medicine in Madras and then transferred to a medical school in Edinburgh, where she qualified as a doctor. No special treatment or allowance for being a woman of colour. She simply followed the same procedure as everybody else and duly ended up as a doctor in 1890s Britain. There was no mention at all by her or her family of racial prejudice holding her back. Another example would be Member of Parliament Diane Abott, who, it is often suggested, overcame racial prejudice to become an MP in 1987, the first black MP in the British Parliament. Again, you've all heard of Diane Abott, but nobody has heard of Dadabai Nao Oroji. He was elected as the MP for the Central London constituency of Finsbury Central in 1892. He was an Indian, and the newspapers didn't even mention the fact at that time. He appeared at things like school prize days in his constituency and all sorts of other events, and there was no mention whatever of the fact that he wasn't white. Why? Because nobody in those days cared. All that mattered was that his performance as an MP was up to scratch. One final example should make the point. In 1863, Mona Mohan Gose qualified as a barrister at Lincoln's Inn in London. He too was Indian. There were loads of Indian barristers in late 19th century Britain. As usual, I give a link about these people in the description to this video. When people are talking about racism in the British Empire, they must be careful not to project modern ideas and prejudices upon the past. What has happened is that the people of colour who succeeded in Victorian England and Scotland by their own efforts are simply ignored, because they do not accord with the narrative of racism which is currently fashionable. Instead, dubious characters like Mary Seacole are widely publicised, and their stories exaggerated and distorted to make political capital. Instead of celebrating the fact that those of different ethnicities were able to get on and flourish in Britain at that time in all the professions, we prefer to pretend that life for anybody who was not white was hard, and that they were subjected to continuous prejudice, which prevented them from getting on and succeeding. In other words, we are looking at a modern trend and trying to impose it upon British history 150 years ago.